Hi, I'm Jared. This is my global sources of primary energy and temperature change project or whatever. So I'm gonna go just quickly say what my goal is. My goal is to pretty much bring this down to 2.0. So just 2 degrees increase. It's mainly because of this line, but also because I think that it is a reasonable enough change that kind of points to a pretty good increase, and it's also kind of looks at it tapering off, so that way the peak is here, and it may even actually have some changes going. So what I want to say first is I don't care about these ones right here. I don't think that there's any real point in changing them. I think that take too much effort to fight for not enough change. Like, see, it's a 0.2 degree change, but when you raise this to pretty high, to like I don't know, like let's say here, when carbon price is changed, then these stop having much of any impact at all. Like, see, this is very little impact comparatively, especially when I think that all the other changes are done. So I'd rather have a carbon price increase than have a tax on carbon rather than taxing any of these. I do think that subsidizing is just a good idea in general for renewable energy. So just bring it up to there. And then also to raise nuclear subsidization just a tiny bit, just because it's my world, I can say what I want about it. And just because over time I do believe that new technologies will be made, and I think that they will come up. I don't think that's going to be super high. I think that at least one new technology will come through and maybe make a change. I don't think that it will take over renewables just because that wouldn't make sense, but I do think that it will rise up. So next, I'm going to be going into these other things, transport. So just from what I've learned in this class, I do think that the increase in energy will be, or increase in energy efficiency will actually be increasing pretty highly because that's just what things seem to be leaning towards. And then with the increase in energy efficiency, it would make more sense to subsidize or incentivize electrification of cars to pretty high, not quite that high, but about this high. And then about equally as this is increased, I would say. And then I would say that this being about equally increased for here and here would make a lot of sense for buildings and transport because if it's if the energy efficiency is increased for cars, then it would make sense for the energy efficiency to be increased for buildings, and then it would also make sense to just uh, for electrification of both to just be the more likely way of going about things. And see, even with just that, if just energy efficiency, like if I take this away and this way, then it already lowers down a lot. But then when you incentivize electrification, it the oil and all these other things peak out around 2030 and then just plummet. So I don't think there's anything you can really do about population. I think that going after population won't really change that much, and even if you move around the slider, it doesn't do a lot. And I also don't think that there's really anything that can be done about it because I think that once the population hits where it's going, then it's going to just sit there and probably balance out a bit. This is something I found interesting though, economic growth. So the more economic growth you have, the higher this goes, but also the higher this goes. So I'm assuming it's something like the United States where people who have a lot of money or like not a lot of money or just a lot of I guess privileges or whatever, they have a higher footprint per person. So I do think that this will just increase just naturally. Next I'm going over deforestation, methane, and all these other things. So this methane and other, I think that just with techniques and like certain farming techniques and just other advancements in farming, I think that it will actually pretty moderately get decreased. So methane and like methane trapping, I've seen like certain ways of like trapping methane from cows and whatnot that can be used. And then deforestation, it doesn't make a huge change. Right now it's just making that change just because it's Like here, it's not really making much of a change. It barely changes anything, even if you completely stop or highly reduce it. But in my perfect world, I would like to see less deforestation and more afforestation. And then technologies for carbon removal. So obviously this is trees, and I'm assuming this is just technologies that like trap carbon or whatnot. I do think that trapping carbon is something that will go up. And see, we're already at our goal, and just from a medium growth here. These are pretty, I would say, hopeful, but I don't think that they're out of reasonable boundaries, especially the way that technology is going. Just energy efficiency, everything. I think that things becoming more energy efficient are the way that things are going, and then it being incentivized, the electricity being incentivized after becoming energy efficient does also make a lot of sense. So I'm gonna just go over quickly what I think makes the most sense for just this. It doesn't make sense to tax this, like see right now, it barely changes anything just because of these changes here. So going after all of these is kind of a pointless pursuit. Oil, I don't necessarily care for this big hump here, but also it goes down pretty quickly along with coal. It's a little behind coal, but whatever. And then just putting just the fire under them here, it's already a pretty big change. It's $92, which is a pretty heavy tax. And then if you raise up to like 100, it stops making as much of a difference. But from here and then to a pretty high one here, it makes a massive difference. But then if you also put that money towards, say, renewable energy, once you have a certain point and it's slightly subsidized, it doesn't really make much of effect if it goes one way or another when it's taxed like this. But I do think that just subsidizing in the perfect world would just be nice for renewable energy, but also it doesn't really matter in the long run, it seems, as long as there's this carbon price here. This is just what I expect from just general advancements. Energy efficiency makes sense for just as advancements go on for energy to become more efficient, and then once the energy is more efficient, being incentivized to electrify cars, buildings, and industry just makes a lot of sense. These two are intertwined. These two are intertwined. So if one of these goes up, probably both these are going to go up. I do expect just economic growth to just go up for the entire world, just in general. Could be more, could be a bit more. I don't know. I haven't looked in that much, but I'm assuming that people will be get more to be closer to becoming in developed countries as they go on, and then they're gonna increase their own economic growth, and then deforestation and all these other things. These ones don't really matter as much, but I do. It's my world. It's my little simulation. I want to see less forest. I want to see more forest, and then with these, I think these two make sense because just increased, just being more conscious of it. And even in the news today, we see us being more conscious about our cattle and whatnot. And technologies to trap carbon are already in use in other parts of the world, so I don't see why they wouldn't eventually come to us. Lastly, I'm going to be going over these questions. So compare the expected temperature change. So here is my temperature change, and then here is the end goal, or the original. And so I changed by about 1.6 degrees. How would the world be better? Well, for one thing, I think that developing countries would definitely benefit because they already have the infrastructure set up, and so they wouldn't have made the same mistakes that the current developed countries have made. And I think that car companies and things like that would actually be improved because they now have a place in this world in the changing world. And then one group that would actually be probably less happy would probably say coal companies or companies that produce a lot of carbon because they are being very heavily taxed and nobody really likes being taxed, and I guess regular people. Um, so three changes that I think that are the most important. I think that the carbon price is definitely the most important. This one is the favorite of mine. I think that energy efficiency is the other most important one. This energy efficiency is definitely a super important one, and I think that methane is a super important one. Energy efficiency because just energy being more efficient is just it makes sense. It's something that no one's really gonna fight against, and I think that it's something that's gonna just kind of stand. Carbon price is the one that I think would get the most pushback, but this is the one that needs to probably go through the most. And then methane and other is probably just natural order, and also it makes a pretty large difference. So two things that I learned from the simulation is that economic growth actually can increase the temperature. So the more money, higher, it can actually have a pretty big effect on the graph. And then another thing I learned, I need two things, I would say is that taxing these really doesn't matter if you have taxes on the one thing that is more important. And then share the question or suggestion or thought. My question is, does this look like something that might actually be reasonable or not something that could happen? Because I, to me, this seems like it's something that could be pretty accurate and pretty fair, but I'm not entirely sure if everyone would agree with me. So yeah, that's the end of that. Thank you.